Hi, I'm Meta Spencer, and I think that we ought to go to Ukraine today, shall we? That's one place that I haven't been to for a while. And this is a schmooze day, and I have two friends with me. One here in Toronto, McDonald Scott, who used to be my assistant about 20 years ago or more. And he's now, he's working now to help, I guess the polite word is undocumented immigrants to Canada. Is that the right word, Matt?
Yeah, that or non-status.
Non-status.
We're very against the use of the word illegal.
That's right. The name of, I believe you work for an organization called No One Is Illegal.
That's correct. I was just going to say that.
It's lovely. I like the sentiment. Nobody should ever be illegal. Let me go back to Kiev, where we have Andrei Kamenchikov. Andrei works as a peace organizer in Eastern Europe. He works to sort of coordinate maybe an umbrella organization of peace groups in Eastern Europe.
We have organizations from obviously Ukraine, Moldova, Belarus, Russia, Bulgaria, Romania, and Lithuania at this point. GPAC has a Caucasus network, a Central Asian network, a Northeastern Asian network, and many of these networks also include some organizations from Russia. Probably about half are Ukrainian.
Are you mainly doing policy work, or how are you working towards peace?
It's usually not my own projects. It's trying to help others, develop joint projects, maybe support some small scale initiatives.
Do you believe in umbrella organizations? I was on the steering committee of the International Peace Bureau for 3 years. And that meant I would go to Europe 3 times a year to one or another city. We'd always have meetings in different places. And I felt, I finally came to the conclusion that really the decisions had to be and were made by the Secretariat and the 2 presidents. Mm-hmm. And that the steering committee of 10 people or whatever that got together really couldn't do much more than just be a rubber stamp ratifying whatever decisions they'd made, because the amount of interaction that we were able to carry out at that time among ourselves to discuss policy issues that were ongoing was minimal. And therefore, I found it felt to me, now maybe with Zoom today, a steering committee could have meetings every week and then really be involved in making policy decisions. But I have always sort of felt skeptical that these umbrella organizations do anything more than take some energy away from the member organizations.
Well, I would first of all distinguish between networks and umbrella organizations. I would not want GPAC to become an umbrella organization as such. Mm-hmm. I would like it to be much more of a network. I think that so far there's still enough opportunities to have a network that does serve its members, really. In our network, the members, they're all independent organizations. They have their own projects, their own activities, and so forth. So obviously, being part of GPAC is really usually a very minor aspect of their activities. What the network provides, it provides a forum to exchange information, exchange expertise. We also try to support joint projects when different organizations work on a certain theme. Sometimes if we have the capacity, we try to support maybe some small pilot initiatives. So it's not like, a centralized system.
Mac,
Yeah.
You are our refugee expert, and this is the time when we are going to be needing some experts on refugees. Tell me what you expect to have happen. Will your group be involved with helping these Afghans settle, or because they will presumably all have documents and have papers to come, maybe the government itself will be doing most of the work and helping them settle. I believe I heard that Canada has agreed to, or has promised to take 20,000 people from Afghanistan. Is that the case, or do you know? And what is your role likely to be, if any, in this matter?
I mean, so that what Canada does is it does what's called a government-assisted refugee sponsorship, where basically the government takes responsibility for the first year that the refugee family is here to make sure that basically that they're able to support themselves, to survive, to pay their rent for the first year. The problem is that, and Canada's, I believe you're right. We've agreed to take a certain number of refugees. The problem is that it's often a slow process. Even with Syria, we saw that though this process was expedited, people were still taking 6 months to a year to get here. And in Afghanistan, that could be, given the current situation, could be extremely dangerous. Actually, I am all in favor of pulling troops out of anywhere, but the Afghan situation is such a mess. Just today, they announced that they're not going to provide any more money through the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. And so I think, even a day in Afghanistan can be a very dangerous day. Maybe that the United States will put pressure on the IMF to allow, loans to be given to the new Taliban government in exchange for getting that extension. I don't know. I do know, because I've had a lot of Afghani cases, though, that the withdrawal of the troops is going to leave a lot of people in extreme danger. Like, I had a client, and all he did was he was a baker, and he supplied bread within the American zone, like within the, the NATO zone. And they tried to kill him. The Taliban's underground forces tried to kill him because he was supplying bread to the Americans. So, and there are a lot of people who directly or indirectly were providing support to the occupying forces. And those people, it's going to be like Vietnam all over again, only worse, because the Taliban is a much nastier being than the Vietnamese government was. But, you're going to see lots of people are just not going to get out. And the Taliban's happy to have them leave. They just want them gone. But if they don't get out, they're gonna jail them. They're gonna kill them. It's a mess.
Okay, what about setting up border zones, stations in Pakistan or one of the stands bordering Afghanistan, so that people, if they can escape across the border, they'll have a way to get out?
Now, that's normally a very porous border, especially Pakistan. The majority of the Afghani refugees I've worked with were in Pakistan, because until the new announcement, you had to be outside of the country in order to apply. But I suspect that the Taliban may tighten that up. The other thing that may happen, and it has happened in the past, is that the stands, well, I know Pakistan the best, may decide to take their own actions to stop refugees coming in. In Pakistan, any Afghani refugee is actually in danger of being removed at any time, and they have done mass removals. So, it's not a safe situation.
I saw a report from the Afghan-Pakistan border that showed actually that now very many refugees, or many refugees, are returning to Afghanistan. Those refugees who didn't feel safe during the U.S. occupation and so forth. So
yeah,
it's a very mixed process. Some people are returning, some people are leaving. I also, it's important to understand that, like, I don't know the situation in Pakistan, but, the Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, that border on the north, they all have their very serious internal issues.
Hmm. And the same in Pakistan.
Yeah.
The same in Pakistan. I mean, and it's an extraordinarily tenuous life to be living in Pakistan or any of the stands as a refugee who's fled Afghanistan, constantly not able to work legally, constantly worried about deportations. And I'm just looking at the Canadian program, and other than the Afghani nationals who assisted the government of Canada to apply for the special program, you will have to be outside of Afghanistan. So yeah, they're going to have to apply from Pakistan or from any of the other stands. And they also have to fall within certain categories, like they have to be LGBT or human rights advocates, women leaders, journalists, or family members. So you're looking at a small group of people. And in my experience, it's going to be slow. And people are going to be living in extremely tenuous situations until they actually get to Canada. So, I mean, it's a good program, but it's kind of a drop in the bucket.
Well, okay. I saw something today about how some people with Canadian passports are trying, and they are told that they should just go to the Canadians and they'll be taken out, but they go to the airport and nobody will let them in the airport because they have a Canadian passport, but there's no Canadian there, no Canadian Army or anybody to process them. And so some of these people have been sleeping outside the gates for, whole family for about 4 or 5 days, waiting to find some Canadians. So clearly, in theory right now, there must be an understanding that if they get to the airport, they should be able to leave from Kabul, but
yeah,
they can't.
But they can't.
Yeah, but when you say they're not going to be allowed to except outside the country, is that going to be, well, starting when? I mean,
well, so what the special program is saying is if you're an Afghani in Afghanistan and you assisted the Canadian government in the line of your work, you can apply from Afghanistan. But if you're applying for any other reason for refugee status, you need to be outside of Afghanistan.
mm-hmm.
And even then, it's certain categories. They're good categories, but you have to fit into certain categories.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Andre, you were beginning to tell me something about the difficulty of visiting Russia. That you've spent 2 months there recently, and that you don't know how much longer you'll be able to do that. I'm not sure what that amounts to. What's the problem, or what might become the problem?
There are two sides. One is technical. Today, to get from Moscow to Kiev, I had to spend 12 hours flying through Turkey, and then do 2 COVID tests, and then stay, for a week on self-isolation and all that.
Where? In Turkey?
No, once I got to Kiev, so I'm off that now. But those are technical issues. The more substantive problem is that government is basically trying to get rid of any real political opposition of any sort right now in Russia, and what that means is that the mechanisms, people that are doing that are getting promoted, they're being directed to find so-called foreign agents, or find something against any political figure. They'll complete this job. They already practically completed. They'll complete it very soon. But the question is, will they stop there? Or will this mechanism that is meant to fight opposition, will it continue to roll? You start this machine going, and with a certain purpose, And then once that purpose is achieved, I'm not speaking about, the righteousness of all this, of course, and all that, but even from a very, cynical point of view, once the immediate purpose that you had in mind is achieved, does that mean that these institutions stop? If every region would get a assignment to find a certain number of foreign agents, let's say in this region, the way it works.
Yeah.
Okay, you find, and then what, do you stop with that? No, you need to find new ones. It's like,
Yeah.
so I'm worried, I don't know. I hope that's not going to happen. I hope it's not going to become the self-propelling mechanism of political repressions, because I don't think it's in the interest of the political elite either. They have their immediate goals relate to the parliamentary elections. They have, they don't want anyone to challenge them, and they basically outlawed any substantive opposition in a country. You can't really challenge. But the question is, when they get rid of, or when they win this, this first, when they achieve this first goal, the people that are doing this, will they stop or won't they stop? I don't know. We'll probably know in about half a year.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wonder whether they hold any special concern about you, since you have dual citizenship, Russian and American.
Millions of people have dual citizenship today in Russia. Millions. And
well, yes, but they're not all American. How many of them are U.S. and Russian?
Well, I think we're in the hundreds of thousands here. But anyway, the fact is that it's not. See, the elite itself, I'm sure that a high percent of the people in the elite have dual citizenships. Most of Putin's friends that became multi-billionaires over the last few decades, they have either other citizenships or residence permits or things like that. So the question is, okay, today they have the, let's say, the last remaining real political opponents, people linked to Navalny or, some other political groups and so forth. So they basically all have been outlawed now, and they're not allowed to participate in elections. Even people that belong to registered political parties, but that are seen as, being too outspoken, like people in the Yabloko party that have been, there are a few quite outspoken and fairly well-known people among, within that party. They're not being allowed to take part in the elections, even though the party is. People in the Communist Party, the former presidential candidate during the last presidential elections from the Communist Party, he's been removed by some phony, ridiculous excuse.
What was his name?
His last name was Grudinin, Pavel Grudinin. He was actually a businessman. He had he was head of a farm not just outside of Moscow that produces vegetables, I guess, something. I don't know. I don't know much about him. I'm not a supporter of his political party or anything.
But he's been sacked or been told he can't run.
Yeah, he can run. It's funny because 3 years ago he was the official candidate in the presidential elections, got probably 12 or something percent, and today, he's not even allowed to participate in the elections for the parliament. Because so the question is, okay, I don't have many illusions now. Unfortunately, the it seems that the government will get its way. They will do what they want, and basically they're going to end up, there's not going to be any real political opposition in Russia. I don't think by the end of this year. It's likely that the last remaining media will be, either closed or labeled as foreign agents, and their continuation of their functioning will be, like Echo Moscow and so forth. I don't know how long they will last in their current capacity. Maybe they will formally exist, but they won't have the capacity and the influence that they have now. I don't know what's going to happen, but the fact is that once this is achieved, does that mean that this whole process of witch hunting stops or not? I don't know.
And this is in Russia, Andre?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. I think what we're seeing in many different cases is we're seeing a consolidation of governments that is leaning, fortunately we had Biden elected in the States, but that is leaning very far to the right and very far to, basically shutting down methods of democratic decision-making. And, that worries me.
I think that there's a general problem with populism. It can be right, it can be left.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Or sometimes it can be both at the same time.
It can be both at the same time. I think, to be honest, I think that it's important to be very self-critical also about many of the, it's important to understand why right-wing movements only gain lots of support, maybe, in Europe, like with the crisis with refugees and things like that, there is a reaction to that. The same thing, this is something that you deal with in Canada and so forth. So,
yeah, but not. Just looking historically at Europe, in Europe at the treatment of Roma, like we have that here, but it's not quite as intense.
No, I think in general, if you were asking what's the best country in the world to be an immigrant, Canada would be right close to the top.
Yeah, I agree. So I think so. Yeah.
The problem is, though, we are like, I actually completely agree. But the problem is that the way it works is that Canada has quietly set up huge borders that you can't even get into Canada in the first place. Once you get here, it's the best, one of the best places outside of maybe the Netherlands to be a refugee. But the fact is that we only accept a trickle of the millions of refugees on the planet. Places like Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt accept thousands times what we accept as refugees.
Canada has a land border only with the U.S., and I don't think there are too many people that are trying to escape from the U.S. into Canada, even though you do get some every now and then. But
Andre, just as a bit of an aside and a humorous thing, when Trump first got elected, my phone lines were completely filled with people from the United States trying to figure out how to get here.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly leftists or queer.
Yeah.
A lot of people do try to get through the U.S.
Yes.
If they get into the U.S., they can't necessarily stay there, and they know it, and so then they try to get into Canada that way. But there are a lot of people that cross the border in places where there are no real border crossing. They climb under a fence or something.
I noticed, I used to travel to Canada from the US and back, and I noticed that over time the border became more of a border than it used to be, just nothing much at all.
right now, under the guise of COVID, so the famous one that you're talking about, Meta, is the Roxton Road in Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually went down and gave a training to a group of really, really nice people, Unitarians, just south of Roxton Road, that were assisting people in getting to Canada. But they've since shut that down under the guise of COVID. So I'm still getting refugee clients, but either they came before the shutdown happened or they somehow got a visa to come into Canada. And then even before the shutdown happened, we have the safe third country. So technically, unless you have family here, even when the border is open, you can't make a refugee claim unless you manage to get to soil, which is what people were doing at Roxton Road, is they were crossing onto Canadian soil, at which time they have to let you do a refugee claim. But, the demeaning nature of what we put people through in most Western countries in order to try and be safe and support their families I hesitate to say it, but it's disgusting.
But it's going to get worse, and we all know that. I mean, with global warming, it's going to get worse. And
I think one of the rays of hope is like when you and Andre were talking about large networks and their problems and their positivity. I think the more we work together globally, which things like this lunch contribute to, I think we do have powerful people's movements that can affect the course of policy and the course of where things go.
Mm-hmm. You were saying something in passing, Andre, about how we should understand why there is this movement toward nationalism or right-wing attitude in so many places. Please elaborate, because that to me is the biggest puzzle of all. I simply don't understand why right now there is this upsurge of right-wing extremism all around the world. And also somebody mentioned jokingly that it can be both right-wing and left-wing. And here's where I would ask you about Navalny, because I wonder what the attitude is toward Navalny in Ukraine. Because when I interview people in Russia, most of them have something to do with Yabloko. And Yabloko had expelled Navalny for being a nationalist. And they, every now and then, I've read things that he apparently was quoted as saying maybe 10, 15 years ago that sound pretty extremist, very critical of people who are not Russian, as if he's some sort of almost like Putin in terms of his attitude toward Russian nationality. So and yet, of course, in other ways, as far as I know, he would be more or less where most of us would be, sort of social democrats or left-leaning liberal types, and therefore, I'm not sure what he really represents. Is he still, in his heart, an extreme nationalist? Was Yabloko right in expelling him, and or has he changed? Because I've talked to Russians living outside of Russia, and they mostly seem to think, well, he used to be that way, but he isn't that way anymore. So what do you think, Andre?
Yeah, I think he made a bunch of mistakes as a young guy getting involved in politics, and I think he did learn a lot. I do think he changed a lot. All these citations that you hear of him, when he made some, are like 10, 15 years ago. I didn't hear anything more recent than that. And I think at certain points he admitted that he made mistakes and people change and things like that. So in that sense, I wouldn't take this very serious. And also today, liberal-minded people that, let's face it, don't have the courage to openly support him, maybe, or to really challenge they feel uncomfortable. So they like, I think that's the problem with the Yabloko party. I have some good friends, in the party that I spoke to, about this. And I said, look, this is your chance. Yabloko could support Navalny openly, and it would gain huge public support. It has what, 1.5, 2% today. It could probably go up to 10, 15%, become a influential political party. But, they're I believe that they're simply afraid of that, that they feel comfortable in their little, political space, where, they are.
Well, it's certainly
recognized.
not big political space. I don't think they even have a seat in parliament anymore, do they?
No, they don't. No, they don't. And I don't think they worry about that. They do get some public financing. I don't know. I was very discouraged by the position of Yabloko's leadership, and specifically, and then I hear from them, oh, Navalny, he was such a nationalist. Yes, 15 years ago he made some stupid statement. So is that, what I just feel that this is irrelevant, in today's reality to speak about. I'm not, if we would have a normal political system and, different candidates, I wouldn't, I'm not sure I would vote for Navalny, for example. There are questions, but it's not about that today. We're moving into an authoritarian dictatorship, that there's not going to be any space for anything very soon. So he's the guy that really put his life on the line. He's obviously the leader of any real political opposition in Russia, and like it or not, and
to what extent, if at all, has he been questioned and asked to take an overt stand about his previous statements, his nationalistic statements? Has he disavowed them very flatly?
I think he did before. To be honest, for me, this is not that much of an issue today. I didn't see anything of that. I've been watching him closely for maybe the last 4 or 5 years, and I didn't see any reference of that sort in his statement. And people change, people make mistakes, and as a young guy, he made some mistakes. So what? I didn't, I didn't see anything that would really, put me off in the last maybe 4 or 5 years that I was watching him carefully as a serious political figure.
But they have actually eradicated his base now, don't they? His organization is defunct.
It's now it's considered extremist. You will get in jail just for supporting it. That doesn't mean he doesn't have support. That doesn't mean that people don't support him. There are millions and millions of people that support him and that would like him, and to be in the political spectrum, and of course not in jail. And of course, they tried to kill him, not just for nothing, because he was getting. That's why they attempted to murder him. So, yeah. Hey, the guy, he was, the government tried to kill him. He miraculously survived. It was a miracle that he survived in the first place, Mm-hmm. Then he put his life on the line. He returned. He gave himself back into the hands of the people that tried to kill him just a few months before that. And we're going to discuss something that we don't, how we don't like something in his political program. Come on, it's not the issue today.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, but the question then pragmatically, how in the hell could he get any kind of political clout, whatever, given the fact they've destroyed his organization and he's not allowed to function? By the way, why can't he and Khodorkovsky make some sort of deal? Do they have enough in common, or are they both?
I think they're very different people. Khodorkovsky was not a politician. he became a politician after, he was a businessman. He was a, billionaire, one of the richest people in the country. And, he didn't get along with the government or with Putin personally, or I don't know what the story there was, but he was treated as a political opponent, even though he wasn't really a political opponent. I mean, he was an opponent, but he wasn't a politician, let's say, in that sense. Mm-hmm. Yes, he had lots of influence, and he, could get certain things through the parliament and so forth. So, in a sense, he was a politician, but he doesn't recognize him. So I don't think he really saw himself in that role. Navalny was in politics from the very beginning.
Khodorkovsky said when he was outside the country that he still has a few pennies left, and he was going to be running some sort of movement against Putin from outside the country. Now, I don't know what it would be like. It couldn't be a political.
I don't think it resulted in anything significant. Okay. See, that's the problem. That's one of the reasons Navalny returned. He didn't want to be like Khodorkovsky. That was what the government wanted him to become, be like Khodorkovsky, make your YouTube videos from outside. And still, no, he did something. Look, let's face it. He did something that no other opposition figure did. He put his life on the line. He returned, gave himself into the hands of the people that tried to assassinate him. And, that put him in a certain unique position today. Mm-hmm. He's for now, he's number one of any sort of opposition in Russia. And that will probably remain for a while. Because I don't think many people would, first of all, not many people have, achieved as much as he achieved before he was, before the assassination attempt, of course. And I don't think that many people would do what he did.
Of course not. I wouldn't. I mean, yeah, you'd have to say you'd have to be half crazy, if you
there are people like that, but it's not a common thing to behave that way. And so he is, he's in a sense a kind of a moral leader today, just as not just a political, maybe less a political leader and more kind of a moral figure today.
Okay, but now he also, part of the expose he did was showing this video, I gather. I haven't seen it, but a video of this palace that Putin built. Now, I don't know how Putin has the nerve to deny that he owns it. What does he say? What does Putin say about it?
Formally, he doesn't own it. He's not an idiot. He doesn't own almost anything. Formally, there's someone else. And so that's the thing. That was his. He said, this has nothing to do with me. There's no documents in any way linking this with me. And he's true. Putin's actually true in that because formally, he has no relationship to that, So
who does he say it belongs to?
Well, he just said, has nothing to do with me. And then about a few days later, I think it was one of his buddies, Rattenberg, one of his, his purses, so-called, one of these oligarchs that was his friend from childhood, that claimed that this is his real estate.
And he doesn't have to explain where he got the money for this thing.
Well, he's officially a multi-billionaire. He's one of the. He was a friend of Volodya Putin when Putin was like 10 years old. They went to a sports club together, and he and his brother. They're two brothers, they're both multi-billionaires today. Yeah. They all became extremely successful businessmen once Putin became president. And so they're officially, very rich people. So it's not.
Mac, do you get still any refugees from Eastern Europe, or do they come in some legal way?
We get some, mostly Roma.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
But that's really about it. Usually people are coming under, the express entry program or one of the what we call business class programs.
What does that mean? Are they refugees or not?
No, they're what we call economic migrants. So they basically would have to have some kind of work experience in a skilled category. Then they get rated based on their work experience, their education, their English and or French language skills, and then also their experience with Canada. And they take the top layer of that. Canada's immigration numbers have dropped during COVID, which is not good for the economy or for the future. Well, for my pension anyways. So they actually expanded they lowered the threshold last year for what you have to meet in order to come as an economic express entry migrant.
Okay, so they're trying to get more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe all of these Afghans, maybe that'll help.
I mean, I don't want to generalize, but my Afghani clients are often extremely well educated.
Really?
That may be that's who can actually get a visa to get into Canada and make the refugee claim in the first place. But they're usually very well educated, and they're often, for obvious reasons, very accepting of Western values and culture. Often that's actually why they've been targeted. You also get really strong feminists. You get queer folk, LGBTQI folk, and then you get political folks. I had a client who was a communist from Afghanistan and was part of the communist government in Afghanistan. And he came extremely well educated, but they refused to give him status because they said the Afghani government had been involved in human rights violations, which he was a part of. And so therefore they weren't going to give him status. And he was stuck here in Canada. Afghanistan was not going to take him back. And he is basically de facto stateless. So you get quite a variety.
So how did you help him? What do you do in a case?
We couldn't win it.
What they do with him? Leave him here?
He's here, but he's just basically in limbo.
Yeah. I had a friend like that from Myanmar, Burma. He was a Karen a number of years ago. And he had been in the Karen army in the jungle fighting against the Burmese government.
Yep.
And of course, and he'd killed people. He'd been a sniper. And he made it clear that he'd been a violent guy. Well, that made him into some sort of terrorist. So he couldn't get any kind of legal job or anything for many years. And only when there was this moment when Aung San Suu Kyi was riding high and, she got into the government and it looked like they were going to be real democratic until about a year ago. And that's when the government of Canada said, oh, okay, then you're a good guy. We'll let you become a citizen. And he is now. But it wasn't, there were years and years when he had to depend on his friends for some help now and then financially because he couldn't make it.
Remember that old cartoon where they have a picture of someone with an AK-47 and it says freedom fighter. And then they have the same picture next to it saying terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
One government's freedom fighter is another government's terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to comment where we're speaking about this example and now think related to this, what this talk about Navalny making some stupid statements 15 years ago, how terrible he is that he made some stupid statements 15 years ago.
Well, hey, our prime minister did blackface 20 odd years ago.
Well, yeah. What I'm saying is, here you have cases with people, that in fact, yes, they were part of insurgency or who knows, that killed people and so forth. But this is life, things happen. Today they're refugees, and they want to be treated as refugees because they are refugees. And here you have a case with a politician that other liberal-minded people, some, not all, but some, point their finger at him and say, 15 years ago he said something, that was not nice.
Well, Mac, what is the possibility that Canada could go scoop up some of these refugees on the southern border of the U.S. and relieve the pressure? Biden is having really a hard time with those guys, or he was. I don't know. I haven't seen anything the last few weeks, but there was a huge crush of people waiting to get in. And why can't Canada, if we're short of refugees this year, why can't we go take some of those people from Central America?
Canada suffers under a mistaken belief that we're like so entitled that we should only get like the top creme de la creme of immigrants. So people who already speak English or French, people who work, doctors and lawyers, because we need more taxi drivers who have, their medical certificate. So, and people aren't as anxious to get here as we think. A lot of the Mexicans are, and the Central Americans who come through Mexico. The problem is that you would somehow have to transport them to Canada. And certainly, I don't want to generalize, but I have a lot of Mexican clients, and they're hardworking, often in trades that Canada really needs, like construction. But to get here, the obstacles are so hard. We would have to do, but there is precedent. During the El Salvadorian Revolution and, and the Guatemalan situation back in the 70s, Canada did take in a lot of El Salvadorian, Guatemalan, Nicaraguan refugees and set up special programs. So there is precedent. They could set up a special program to bring people in. Mm-hmm. I just think, to be honest, I think there's a lot of racism against Latin American people in this country.
Really?
And I think that's what's guiding it. The assumption is that you're going to come here and end up on welfare, and hardly anybody does. Sorry, Andre.
I think we should face it. This is a global problem that no one country can take care of, because yes, you can help temporarily here or there, but after all, the reality is that when you have a world divided so dramatically in terms of wealth, in terms of people's rights, in terms of governance and so forth, you will have, and of course, climate change is also a contributing factor today, just as conflict and so forth. You will have this endless problem. It's really until the world gets taken care of on a global scale, I don't think much is going to change.
No, I agree.
Refugee will keep coming. The wealthier countries will keep trying to set up barriers, because there's only a limit of how much they can. So it's a global issue. It's a global problem, and people will be looking for a better life for themselves, for their families. That's natural, and unfortunately, so many people are disenfranchised today in the world that what can you do with that? And it can be material conditions, it can be repressive governments, it can be war, it can be environmental issues, it can be anything.
And I hate to say it, but like a lot of those problems are created by Western influence, whether it's in terms of debt in a lot of global South countries, or in terms of like with Afghanistan. Like we've mismanaged Afghanistan for 40 years.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but there's another. I mean, the fact is that, I mean, Biden said, I think I agree. You can't build a democracy in a society that's not prepared for it. That's the
No, that's
reality.
true. That's true.
And how do you do it? Soviet Union trying to build communism there, that didn't work. US, it doesn't. It's just these things, they just don't work.
But
And
then at the same time, the United States armed basically the forerunners of the Taliban in order to fight communism. Like they intervened there, and I don't know that it was.
and the Soviet Union left lots of weapons there, and the U.S. Left its share, and then the Taliban developed, and then the U.S. came in, and now, of course, left hundreds of times more modern weaponry. So
Yeah, and also
Taliban probably have. If they learn to use it, they'll have one of the strongest militaries in the region.
Okay, well, we've
it's a
done
little
it, guys.
it's a little frightening to think that the Taliban will have the strongest military in the region.
Well, I think the question is, it's kind of the thing is you need to be educated to operate the modern equipment.
That's true. That's true.
And if you're educated, it's kind of a rare case to be an educated fanatic. It kind of goes with education and fanaticism. It doesn't. I mean, there are some cases, but
yeah, there are some cases.
But usually it's kind of in two different directions. It goes in two different directions. So hopefully, or either the Taliban will have to really change, or they won't have access to many, maybe won't be able to properly use many of the much of the weaponry that they got their hands on now.
Well, thank you both. It's been fun.
No problem. It's been nice to meet you, Andre.
To meet you.
Okay. Bye-bye, guys.